What's up, y'all? Connex5 here with another video on the development of the new Unreal Tournament game. And as you may have figured out by now, this is going to be centered around Unreal Tournament 3. Now, the reason that I wanted to do a quick overview of this title is because I know a lot of people are really familiar with what was available in UT99 and in UT2004 as far as gameplay mechanics and the tool set and everything that you have in those games. A lot of folks didn't play UT3 or played it for a little while and really didn't delve into the specific details of it. And so while there's a lot of talk going on the forums and IRC and pretty much everywhere else about what should go into the design of the new game, I think it's worthwhile to take a look back at the game that really everyone kind of forgot about, frankly, and look at some of what they did to reconcile the other two games and really even solve some of the problems that remain from the two. So yeah, if you can see on the left, I'm going to go down these sort of in order and try to categorize things and make a little bit of sense of them. Right now, one of the first things I want to go over is just a quick look at some of the weapon changes they made. This isn't meant to be all-encompassing, as I say. As you start off with your Enforcer, kind of like UT99 style, a couple little changes to it. For the main chain is going to be your alt fire, which rather than just firing faster, actually does give you a 3-round burst. That's less accurate, but of course what it allows you to do is peek around corners, pop out some damage. You know, if you know someone's around the corner, you can pop around, give 3 quick shots, and then pop back behind cover. It still feels a bit like a dice roll. If you get lucky and you hit 4 or 5 shots in a row at someone, you can take down someone and do a lot of damage really fast. But it really doesn't solve the problem of a starting weapon that can be effective with skill, but isn't overly useful. You know what I mean? You can still put out a lot of damage with it. It just feels like it requires a lot more luck than anything. And so, not a perfect solution, but it's what they decided to use in this game. So one thing to consider when looking at potential ones in the next game. One thing they did with Bio Rifle, for the most part, it's the same as the previous games. However, you'll notice that whenever I hit someone with the alt fire, it's actually going to do damage over time. So this won't kill them immediately. It'll do a bit of damage until they die, and that'll give them a chance to take a couple shots at me before they die. You see what I mean? If I find someone, the more stacked someone is, obviously the longer they'll last. Let's see if I can find someone with some armor or something that lasts a little longer. In the meantime, we'll notice that most people will remember that jump boots actually allowed you to dodge jump. It's a little bit overpowered in this game. It pretty much wasn't used in Capture the Flag for that very reason. There you go. You see, the damage over time allowed him to kill me even after I hit him. And this is a good illustration here, too. You notice these 2 players here. I spawned right next to them. Team Deathmatch actually does that in UT3. It spawns you near your teammates, kind of like some of the other, I guess you might call military-style shooters try to do. And this is a huge problem in this game, because what it actually allows you to do, on the one hand, it allows you to lock a team into a room. So say all of us died at the same time, there's a chance we could all spawn right around this same area and be completely locked into a room. And it's happened to me in matches. I've done it to other teams in matches. It's something that really messes with the dynamics of Team Deathmatch, and I think it's to be avoided in the future. You just saw there the Redeemer actually knocks you down now, so even if you're not within the blast radius, it has a chance to disrupt you. Don't think that's really relevant for competitive purposes, but it is a change that they made. It is significant. Let's see. I did want to illustrate too. Let me take some damage here. If you kill someone with the Bio Rifle, oh god, within that time frame, you see what I mean with everybody popping in? Within that time frame of it killing them, you see it actually killed me. You'll notice my goo killed myself. So if someone hits you with goo, even if you don't have a weapon to hit them with, you can actually dive into them and potentially take them out alongside you. I've always thought that was an interesting counter to the point-blank sort of instant death that you saw from Bio Rifle shots in especially UT2004 and especially 2003, where it just shot out like a cannon. Let's see, Shock Rifle. I'll go ahead and illustrate this point. Shock Rifle, another compromise sort of in between UT99 and UT2K4 styles. Relatively, middle-of-the-road rate of fire as well. You can sort of chalk juggle, but it's not timed in a way where you can keep someone completely pinned back with it. Which is probably for the best, considering that there is obviously no shield gun in this game. Otherwise, Shock Rifle, pretty much your standard Shock Rifle. Some slight changes over other games, but pretty much is what it is. Small changes to the rocket launcher that I would like to note. Not only did they incorporate, all 3 rockets and the tight spiral, they also allow you to shoot grenades. So they managed to combine every rocket launcher fire mode into one game. Thought that was a really clever solution to that, and something that should definitely be carried over to the new game. One thing I will note that's kind of subtle, but if anyone who's like me and shoots yourself in the face with rockets all the time will appreciate the fact that you'll notice after you charge your third rocket in this game, it doesn't instantly shoot. You can hold it down for another split second, give you a chance to decide when to let it go. So like I can hide around a corner. And you see what I mean? You listen and see the animation. It gives you a little bit of a window of error there where you can decide whether you want to shoot them instantly or maybe hold them and pop around corners. It can obviously be rather annoying as well, but it definitely allows you to avoid shooting yourself in the face a little bit, like I know I do all the time. Link primary, a little bit faster, probably more like UT99 style. What I really want to illustrate is the linking function. Rather than it being tied to physically linking your teammates like in 2K4, it's purely proximity based. So let me see if I can find a teammate that's going to have that equipped. It's maybe a little bit trickier. See if I can find a teammate, period. But what it is it's proximity based. So if you're near a teammate that has it out, it will automatically use the linking function. The problem with that is you have to be extremely close to your teammates, and as you might imagine, it leaves you really vulnerable to splash damage. There we go. Let's see if my little bot teammate there. Come on, buddy. Grab it. There you go, Reaper. So you notice, as I get close to him and he has this link gun out, it automatically increases the damage on my link gun. It will increase the damage on his as well. However, as you'll notice, you have to be really, really close to your teammate. So it basically removed it from gameplay. And one of the things, too, that I think was lost with this is the ability to engage in combat that you're otherwise out of position for. So say my teammate is shooting someone and chasing someone down, I can link up with him. Even if I'm around the corner, I can take part in combat that I'm otherwise too far away. And I think that added a nice dynamic. It still required a lot of teamwork and even a lot of aim to keep to activate correctly. So that's something that I'd like to see them go back to if they decide to use a linking function at all in the next UT. Definitely think that they don't want to perhaps stick with the exact same style as in UT3. The next UT, I should say, needs something other than this, because otherwise it pretty much got taken out of the game altogether, like I say. What else to note? Well, Stinger, primary pretty much like every other minigun, you know, hit scan, inaccurate, lots of damage. Alt fire, however, projectile that knocks people back. You can see it can be pretty disruptive here. It's really good for suppression, like area control. You can fire it at a doorway, you can knock people off of the shield gun like that, or shield bell I should say. One interesting possibility, I know they've been trying to figure out other ideas on how to tweak the minigun, but just in case you hadn't played the game, that's what it does there. What else are we looking at? Let's see if I can show you the alt fire of the piston. What it actually does is it charges up essentially an EMP blast. In the vehicle game types, this will actually eject someone from their vehicles. In every game type, if you hit someone with the belt on that's not your teammate, it'll actually cause offensive power-ups, be it belt or damage amp or whatever, to actually eject off of them. And what that does is it's like if you played the old multiplayer Mario Brothers scenarios, it'll actually be like bouncing on their heads. It'll cause them to fly away from them and give you a chance to actually pick it up, which is kind of cool. It didn't happen a whole lot in gameplay. What it did do was it allowed you to counter people who just dove right in and kamikaze. So let's say you have 3 teammates around a power-up. Enemy jumps in and takes it. It gave you a chance to take it back. It also gave you a chance to turn a corner against someone who had an amp or whatever the case may be, and seal it from them. See what I did there? I just popped it off them and took it myself, and all of a sudden I've got the advantage now. So an interesting gameplay mechanic. Whether it was balanced, whether it really was used all that much, I can't really comment on it. No, I used it mostly in less organized games because it was just such a big risk. But I also do think it's kind of amusing, and maybe something they can rebalance to make a little more relevant to I guess common gameplay. Oh, one thing I forgot to show you for the shock rifle, very important. They actually made these shock balls have point collision. In other words, you'll notice you can cut corners really easily with it because unless your crosshair is right on the map, it's going to go right past it. This allows you to cut corners, which is kind of cool. It also allows you to shoot through really tight grates and things like that, like things I think you can shoot through the lip, maybe not. You can obviously use blocking volumes to stop that, but there are parts in maps where you don't think you should be able to shoot a shock ball through that you can. That makes things a little bit less intuitive. but it is kind of interesting from a gameplay perspective. Now, whether they want to keep that in the next game, I don't know, but worth showing you. Let's see what else we got here. Didn't realize I had a time limit, or didn't realize I had a frag limit on there, so we're just going to pop right back in the same map. I do want to show you the sniper rifle. There's only a little bit of a change to it over the UT99 and 2K4 variants. I think the big problem people had with this game was that it didn't really have the damage output. The rate of fire, as you can see, is kind of slow compared to the other weapons in this game. As far as, you know, the damage output is relatively low, and the sort of quasi-projectile tracer that it gives you wasn't really all that useful as far as telling where your shot is going. Sometimes it'll actually look like it's going through enemies when it's not. Just not really favored by the players very much. I think it also suffers from being kind of an in-between weapon, whereas it's not necessarily, it's kind of hard to decide, I guess, whether you want to keep it out and, you know, just fire sniper round after sniper round at an enemy in a fight, or whether you just want to shoot it and then switch to a better weapon. Of course, the weapon switching in UT3 is a bit slower than 2K4. It might be a little bit faster than UT99 though. But what it does is it kills the ability to really use some weapon combos. Now, of course, it also emphasizes having the right weapon out in the right situation. But I think that that combination is part of what affected the usefulness of the sniper rifle. Alright, I think that pretty much covers everything with weapons. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to another map here so I can show you some of the changes that they made to the power-up pickup system that I think can be extremely relevant in the new game. One of the most important ones is the tweaked weapon stay-on system. So you'll notice whenever I pick up this weapon, it's going to disappear as though it were weapon stay-off. What this actually is a localized version of this. So in other words, this weapon will respawn at me at your normal intervals. However, if there was another player next to me in the same server, this weapon would still be available for them. Everyone has their own independent respawn times. Now, that seems like a needless restriction at first, but what it actually allows them to do is have these weapons that spawn act as larger ammo packs. And this has a couple of effects. For one, you'll notice that, say I'm out of ammo, say I'm way down on ammo, and I'm coming up on a normal weapon base. Normally, I would have to throw my weapon and then pick up another one to get back to full ammo. Here, I just run right back over it, and it's a lot more intuitive. What it also means is that you're never punished for picking up a weapon on the ground. So say there was, I'll show you. Say there was a weapon on the ground here, right next to a base. I don't know how much ammo is in this weapon. If I pick it up and it has 1 ammo, then I'm stuck with 1 ammo in a weapon, and then I have nothing. If I'm stuck, or if I pick up a weapon with ammo that's full, then all of a sudden I've got a better advantage than if I picked up the full one in the weapon base. Now you never have to worry about that. You never have to make that decision, and perhaps most importantly, you never have to worry about accidentally running over a weapon that you don't see, and all of a sudden you're stuck with something that doesn't have full ammo, and then you have to come back to the base and throw it and pick up another one. It was really just, that was the needless restriction. This system is, it really takes away a lot of those sort of unnecessary housekeeping sort of things that you have to do just to keep your weapons full of ammo. So it's a lot more intuitive, it's a lot more useful. Doesn't make a huge difference to gameplay itself, but it cleans up some of the aspects that are really just an annoyance and don't really provide anything to the gameplay. So again, a small change that I think we would really need to see in the new game. I think a lot of people may have missed this because they either didn't play Weapon Stay On due to not playing Capture the Flag, or whatever the case may be. Anyway, something I wanted to show you because I definitely think it's worth noting. Now, another thing I'm going to show you is the weapon pickup, or excuse me, the health pickup bases that they added in this game. You'll notice there is a blue glowy effect on them. This shows up on the health and on the keg power-up. Doesn't show up on the other power-ups, but I'm going to get to that in a second. That little sort of glowy bit, keep your eye on that. I'm going to damage myself. I'm going to pick up one, see it disappear. Pick up another, you're going to see that effect disappear. And I'm going to pick up another. What they did was they made that glowy bit appear before the pickup. So in other words, you'll see it start to glow and start flashing. What that'll do is give you a little bit of an indicator that a health pack or keg is about to respawn. So if you're in the nearby area, even if you don't know the exact timing of, say, health or keg, you'll kind of know that it's about to come up so that you can actually stop and contest it or do whatever you need to do. The nice thing about it is it's not super obvious, but you can catch it in your peripheral vision. I think that's really useful, especially on the keg power-up. That way it kind of helps people who may have a general idea of the spawn but maybe don't know the exact time. You still have to go out of your way and take a risk, waiting on it, but at least if you see it up, it gives you a chance to fight over it and contest it. And I think it's a nice subtle addition that they made that I like to see added to all power-ups, and I think that's one of the suggestions we've had on the forum. So there's just a quick illustration of what it might actually look like in action. Now I'm going to jump over to this power-up. This is why I actually chose this map, because there's two really easy to grab power-ups. First thing you're going to notice, HUD timer. It shows you how much time you have left. I think this is really good for newer players. It's very intuitive. I see no reason why anyone would have a problem with it showing up in the new game as well. I don't think it really takes anything away from the tactics or strategy of the game. It certainly makes things more easy to learn for newer players. And now, one thing they also added is if you grab a second power-up of the same type, it's completely additive. So not only does it it doesn't just reset and give you the full regular amount of time by grabbing a second power-up, it actually adds them together. If there were 5 amps in a row in a map for some ridiculous reason, it would just add extra time every single time, and I'd end up with, like, whatever, 2 minutes of power-ups. Now, one thing I do want to illustrate as well is the fact that when you die, you also drop power-ups. See that invisibility dropping right there on the ground. It's the same with all of the offensive power-ups. Now, of course, there's no way around that because you have a defensive power-up like, say, a keg or a shield belt. Obviously, you're not going to die until it's depleted, so there's really no way for that one to drop. I don't remember there being any ill effects of this as far as it, being a balance issue, having only offensive power-ups drop. But it may be a consideration for mappers just because, especially in Capture the Flag, you imagine, with the old system, if you put an amp in mid, you're going to presume that almost all of the time it's going to go to the offensive players, and so that's going to affect what you place where. Whereas in this version of the pickup system, putting an amp in mid means that more often than not, it's going to either lead to a cap, or it's going to be dropped on an attack run and end up getting picked up by the defense. So that also adds a bit of a risk-reward factor to it, in that if you decide to take the amp all the way into the enemy base, there is a chance that they could pick it up and use it against you for the remainder of that amp. So again, I don't necessarily think it's a bad gameplay dynamic. I don't think there was any problems with it in UT3, but it's definitely a slight difference from UT99 and 2K4, and just something to keep in mind. Now, before I move on to the actual movement aspects of this video, I wanted to stop and take the time to point out a couple things that I guess really fall under the power-up / miscellaneous part. And first thing I want to show you is one way to illustrate that the amp is up to everyone in the server. You'll notice this map says Diesel. It's got an amp in the bottom, pretty much middle of the whole map. And they've used visual and audio cues to great effect because they wanted everyone to know when the amp is spawned. See if you can tell. See that? Even standing up right up by shield belt. I have my sounds turned down a bit, but I'll be quiet for a second. In UT3, they really extended the range from which you could actually hear that the amp is spawning. I mean, here I've got multiple walls in between me. I can still hear it, and obviously I can see it. This isn't something that happens on every map. They've used, whatever lighting effect they've used. I'm not familiar enough to know the exact technical aspects of it. Obviously, what it does is it alerts everyone to when it's up, so they know when they want to go down and take this risk to get into this really vulnerable area to try to grab it. So I know there's a lot of folks that have been sort of brainstorming ways to let people know how power-ups, or when power-ups are spawning in maps. One possible option right there. I'm going to add some bots here, because I do want to also show you the bright skin solution that they came up with for this game. Essentially what it does is the further people are, the more that it takes effect. So if you're right up close to someone, you see the blue guys look, they look blue, but there's a lot of neutral colors going on in there. Same thing with my teammates. They kind of have a combination of the team color and the sort of grayed out, sort of grungy look that UT3 really went way out of its way to achieve. What I'm going to try to do though is show you how, at a distance, players get increasingly saturated. And you see a lot of these players are going to turn into red and blue sort of blobs, even at a range across the map. You can even see that dead body. See all these players kind of moving around, being these increasingly bright and saturated colors. And then, of course, if I zoom all the way in, it goes right back to the kind of neutral colors. And this was kind of acceptable. It was also tweaked a little bit in the UT comp to make them a little more glowy. Whether or not this is an acceptable solution, kind of up to you to decide. I did want to illustrate though because it was one solution that we hadn't actually seen before UT3. It wasn't something that we had actually seen modded into games or anything that I know of. Certainly wasn't anything that was explored in a mainstream sense. So, like I say, we're looking at solutions for stuff like that in the next UT, and this is one possible direction that I just wanted to illustrate. So now I'm going to go ahead and get off the DM maps and show you a little bit of the movement in this game. Alright, now I wanted to take you back to some Face Classic here. Facing Worlds, give you a little bit of an idea of scale, since this game has appeared in every single iteration of the series. Let me switch teams on you here while I'm at it. This will give you, again, another good sense of the bright skins from the other team's perspective, kind of how they work at a distance. But yeah, movement. I wanted to get into here and show you a sense of how it's relatively grounded. They really tried to combine the two games' playstyles here by giving you relatively fast-paced lateral movement and a lot of emphasis on just the straight-up dodge. Of course, they did add the double jump, which is somewhat useful in sort of basic combat. It makes you, or it helps you dodge a little bit, but for the most part, the projectile's splash damage is going to make that a little less effective. However, of course, the double jump does combine with the wall dodge in order to give you a little bit of verticality, and that's sort of what they took from the UT 2004 camp of movement tricks. But the main thing that you really need to pay attention to in Unreal Tournament 3 is the air control. I think that's what really affected the game the most. I mean, you can jump around, you can jump in a circle around these pillars, and aside from looking a little bit ridiculous, the effect of this is that combined with the damage changes and the splash damage radius, changes, really all the tweaks that they made to the weapons, it really served to, I think, affect hit scan more than anything, and it really made it a splash damage based game, because when you left the ground, be it cliff jumping or piston jumping or especially boot jumps, you weren't really punished for it. So even something as simple as double jumping in UT 2004, when they were introducing it, if you double jumped around all over the place, you were actually being punished. You had so little air control, you were much more predictable in the air. You were much more likely to get plastered by some rockets, or more likely picked out of the air with a lightning gun or shock primary, or whatever the case may be. In UT3, you're really not punished for going to the air as much, and I think that had a big effect on gameplay that people tend to overlook a little bit. Not only was the hit scan not as punishing, but it also had the effect of making jump boots rather, extremely powerful. They were always useful, especially for changing routes in the previous games, but in UT3 you actually have a big combat advantage. You'll see on maps like Shangri-La, if you're fighting over, say, the shield belt area, someone with jump boots can jump in and pretty much dictate the combat and just rain rockets down and kill everyone from below. So it really had a much bigger impact on individual combat than we saw in previous games, especially, like I say, combined with those big, deadly, splash damage radius projectile weapons that we had in this game. But another effect too, that again is a little bit more subtle, but I think is important to realize whenever you're looking at the spectator appeal and even the player appeal of, say, the next Unreal Tournament, is that having such high air control also made it extremely difficult to hit people in mid-air with any projectiles. I mean, I'm going to jump off of this to give you a little bit of an idea, but like, you can start going one direction, you can go another direction, curve back the other direction, you can basically go in an S-curve in the air. And so whenever you had those situations where you might see someone jump through the air with jump boots or something, and you try to time a projectile perfectly to nail them, that really felt like it was pretty much entirely luck in this game. There was very little room for consistent prediction in trying to hit people with mid-air projectiles. And honestly, some people will argue what takes more skill than another, but I don't think there's any question that what looks more impressive in videos and in streams and everything else is whenever you can watch someone predict someone's movement, 3-5 seconds in advance, and put, a combo, of course, but even something like a mid-air rocket or flak ball. I think that really increases the spectator appeal, as well as just giving those like cool moments to players that don't necessarily know what to look for in the more subtle aspects of the game, but they can appreciate the everyone can appreciate a mid-air rocket to the face. So just another thing to keep in mind whenever we're looking at what they did in UT3 to try to sort of combine the aspects from the previous two games and what they can do in the next game. Yeah, next I'm going to show you some of the capture the flag mechanics and how some of the movement and especially the translocator and piston affected gameplay. But I'm going to switch maps on you for that one, so I'll be back in 1 second. Moving over to capture the flag reflection for you, which is one of the more popular maps out of the box in this game type. I want to give you a little overview of the translocator and the impact piston and how they worked in this game. First thing you notice about the trans when you throw it, it is a big old giant puck. Very easy to see, much bigger target, and they gave it 1 health in this game, which really increased the likelihood of it getting killed, you know, as you're trying to translocate through a, you know, say a bottleneck coming into base and someone's trying to seal behind the flag carrier. Made it much easier to do stuff like that. Again, the size, the colors, and the fact that it had 1 HP made it very common to kill translocators in midair. Whether you think that was a good thing or bad thing, purely subjective, but is definitely something that had an appreciable effect on gameplay. One other thing you'll notice, no translocator camera. If you throw the trans and hit the bind, it actually acts like a switch to last weapon bind. Whether you thought that was handy kind of depends on if you're like me. Whenever I had the translocator out, I sort of habitually hit the translocator bind anyway. So quite a few times in UT3 I found myself with it already out, mashing the button out of habit and then pulling out, you know, whatever weapon I had last equipped. So personally I wasn't a big fan of that. I know I never really used the translocator camera, but I know that there are some people from 2K4 who really use it all the time. So sort of how important its omission in this game was really dependent on the individual person and their habits. I don't think anyone would completely cry bloody murder if it were not in the next game. I also don't think that it was necessarily a broken mechanic that anyone thought needed to be taken out of 2K4. So really kind of a secondary concern either way, but there you go. It's definitely not in this game. One other thing that's a little bit trickier to show you is that the telefragging was a little bit more predictable in this game. I'm going to add some bots here. And it's kind of difficult to tell why, because the puck still, as you can see, it bounced off of players reasonably far. Maybe a little bit less than 2K4's did, but it could be because it had a lower velocity. However, telefrags were a little bit more predictable. They tended to happen when you thought they were going to happen. You know, you could certainly get multi-kills with them. I'm not sure if that's due to the actual way that they worked, or if it was more of a combination of maybe the bigger puck and also the fact that the movement's just a little more grounded and lateral. But definitely more predictable telefrags in this game. One thing I definitely thought was a loss, though, was the fact that your vertical momentum is not preserved now whenever you translocate. So see right there, this is a pretty high lift jump, and if you take it and then telefrag, you pretty much lose all of your vertical momentum. This takes away a lot of the creative attack angles and a lot of the ways you can, anyone who's played 2K4 knows, especially there's some of these maps with the lift jumps and the jump pads and things around the base, where if you time your throw correctly, you can actually grab the flag while translocating and shooting straight up into the air. And it does leave you vulnerable. Like I was saying, you're definitely punished by hitscan for doing that. So it's a risk that doesn't always work out, but it's one more way to be unpredictable and add a little bit more creativity and sort of character to how different players decide to attack the flag and grab it. So that's definitely one thing that I would like to see back in the next game. To what degree, I don't know. There was never any mods or anything to play around with the numbers, but I know it was something that I personally considered a huge loss. It just kind of made it a little more predictable and a little less interesting to me. So yeah, hopefully we'll see preservation of movement. At the very least, get our lift jump grabs back. And yeah, that's pretty much what you have with the trans. I know that you'll notice again, since they didn't do the whole weapon switching thing while holding one button and transing. What they did do, I think, is add, I believe there's a little bit of a delay between when you translocate and when you can shoot again. It's pretty small, but if you're trying to juke, it's definitely noticeable. On the plus side, if you're trying to trans over and over, you won't accidentally switch to your last weapon. So, that's a plus, but some people will have different opinions on the delay. Certainly people who like to juke a lot, and probably more UT9 players, definitely weren't as much fans of that. of course, the translocator kept the charges from 2K4. That's just a whole other can of worms. Everyone's got their own opinion on that. So you can probably just hop onto the forum threads if you want to see every different angle about that. But everyone knew about that already. I'm more here trying to focus on things that people may not have been aware of. So I'm going to pull out the impact piston. Biggest difference in this game is a piston tap doesn't put you nearly as far as 2K4. It's much more like UT99 in that regard. It also only does 7 damage. So the emphasis on the piston, especially when it comes to tapping, was much more on changing routes, and I guess you'd say more on agility than it was on speed. You didn't necessarily gain the pure speed boost by tapping over and over and over like you did in 2K4, but you could do things like this and change your routes very quickly for a minimum amount of damage. However, you will keep in mind that the trade-off, of course, is that in this game, since unlike 2K4 you don't have a shield as part of your piston, when you have the piston out, you're essentially defenseless. You certainly can't do much damage to any attackers. So while it does make you more agile, the trade-off is that you're you're giving up the ability to do damage to pretty much anybody. And they did, of course, like I say, make it a little bit more like UT9 in that if you wanted to charge it all the way up, you could still do a pretty solid jump, and that would give you a pretty big boost. One thing to note too is that these bots would stop harassing me here. I can give you an idea. One issue that we did have in some maps, and this is more of a mapping issue than I guess a gameplay design issue, since we saw more complex meshes and things like that in this game, certain examples like this grate, if you piston off one of those boards, you were fine. If you piston in between, you weren't fine. And so I don't think that's so much to do with like the engine, the version of the engine, or the version of the game, or any of the gameplay design mechanics themselves. But since we're seeing a lot more high poly, complex meshes with complex collision, it's just something to keep in mind. You definitely want to make sure that if you're making maps, just like you want your players to be able to walk over things that maybe look like they can, but you don't want them disrupting gameplay, you want your players to be able to piston off of things that they look like they should be able to piston off of reliably too. And it's definitely no fun to be in perfect position for a flag run and pistoning back to your stand only to have it whiff because you did it, over a little gap in the map like this. So, something to consider. Plus side, you can't trans up there either. Alright, so. And while I'm at it, I guess one more little thing that didn't play a huge role, but certainly flag carriers had to keep in mind. Doing a piston double jump didn't send you as far or as fast as doing a dodge piston, but you could get almost as far if you could do it correctly. And so what you would often see is flag carriers have to decide between doing a faster version with a dodge and more critical timing, or excuse me, a smaller timing window, or whether they decide to do the easier version by just pistoning the ground and then double jumping, but not necessarily going as far, maybe missing the jump. It was kind of a weird little trade-off there. You had to decide between what was easier to propel yourself with, but didn't send you as far, versus something that was more timing dependent, but made it easier to actually make sure you hit the jump. It was an interesting little trade-off. Not sure if I liked it or not, but it was there. It was something people had to keep in mind. But yeah, overall, I think a lot of the pisting that you saw was these, like I say, the quick taps. There were a couple instances where there were maps that you could charge up, halfway or all the way, and have really drastic jumps. I don't think those were as popular just due to the fact that they took away, significantly more health, although still not a lot. But again, they also didn't really push you that far. I'll give you an example. Let me grab some health of what a full piston sort of speed-wise would look. So say you're trying to outrun the defense and you're willing to give up health for the sake of speed. You might drop down here. Again, much more vertically oriented. Or you could hit the ceiling of the map like that as well. Also didn't help you out. So there you have it. Just a quick overview of Unreal Tournament 3 and some of the design decisions that they put into the game. In many ways, they try to reconcile the design of the first and second games just to try to, I guess, find a middle ground. And I think that's interesting to look at as we look into the next game being developed, as well as the fact that some of the problems from the previous games were actually already solved in Unreal Tournament 3. I think a lot of people try to focus on the negatives, but there were some things that are useful to look at. Whether they ended up working or not working, they certainly attempted to solve some of these problems. So as people are, posting on the forum and considering ways to change things, I think it's useful to think back to the least popular game in the series and still look at some of what they came up with, because I think some of it can be useful. So hopefully this video has been useful to some of you who either never played the game or maybe played it for a little while and forgot about it, or just forgot about it altogether. But do keep in mind this game is worth revisiting, especially if you want to see some of this sort of reconciled design decisions that they made. It of course goes on sale like any other game all the time now on GOG, Steam, etc., etc. So you can even find it, I think, in some anthology packs. So it's worth taking a look at. So thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for future videos.